So we are going to start with a 45, 45, 90. And the rule with these is that your legs are both going to be the exact same length, and then your hypotenuse is going to be the leg length times the square root of 2. So to have an example of this, we'll just draw one real quick. And we'll say that we know that this leg length is, let's say, 3. And if I wanted to find A and B, to show your work when you're doing the test, you just have to label it as the rules that are for those sides. So for this, because my leg is 3, I know that A is also 3 because it's another leg of the triangle. And then for B, because it's the leg length times the square root of 2, I take my leg length times the square root of 2. And then that's it. That's the answer. Now, if you had a slightly more complex one, let's say instead of 3, it was something like 4 square root of, 3. In order to find your side, in order to find A, it's still going to be the same thing. So it'd be 4 square root of 3. But to find B, it is your leg length times the square root of 2. So sometimes this gets a little ugly looking if you have radicals in there with it. So then when you multiply it, the square root of 3 times the square root of 2 is just the square root of 6. So then B would be 4 square root of 6. Now, another variation to this is when instead of knowing a leg length, you know like your hypotenuse. So let me get rid of some of this. Okay, so let's say that my hypotenuse is 4 square root of 2. Now for some of you, you can see it already. We have this square root of 2 being shared, which means my x is just the thing in front, which is the 4. Now, if you don't see it that way, anytime you have a value for one of the more complex rules, like when it looks like that, you take your value and you set it equal to the rule. So then, because we're just trying to solve for our sides, we would divide by the square root of 2 to get it away from the x. And then in this case, it just cancels out, so we get that x equals 4. Now, a slight variation to that is, let's say that our hypotenuse instead is just a number. So let's say it's 10. Okay, so if my hypotenuse is 10, and I'm going to keep the purple work just in case someone's still looking at it, but if my hypotenuse is 10, I take its value and I set it equal to the rule. So because it's 10, it is equal to x squared root 2. So to solve this, I'm still going to divide by the square root of 2, but it cancels out on the right. And on the left, you have to rationalize. So we're going to have to multiply both the top and the bottom by the square root of 2. So on the top, we have 10 square root 2, and then the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 4. And then most of you already know we have 10 square root of 2 divided by 2 equals x. And then finally, 10 divided by 2 is 5 square root 2. And by the way, do not feel like you have to show all of these steps. Just make sure that you are careful when you are simplifying with that. So that's about the most complex it can get with the right triangles. About the worst, or about the only other case I can think of is that if you had like 6 square root of 6, then when you do that division, and I'll just do it real quick, when you divide by that square root 2, they still cancel out, but then when you have radicals that are getting divided over the top, you just divide those numbers. So we keep the radical, and then 6 divided by 2 is 3. Okay, so that kind of gives you a good idea of everything that you can run into when you have a right triangle with a 45. So now, if we go to 30, 60, 90s, the rule for this is that your short leg is x, and actually, here's what we'll do. We'll have my x out here. Oopsie. And then the long leg is your short leg times the square root of 3. And then your hypotenuse is double your short leg, or your short leg times 2. So we'll use this picture for all of them. So the first easiest case is probably when you just have a number, like 3. So if my short leg is 3, I know that my long leg is 3 times the square root of 3 because it's the x value. So you just take whatever your short leg is, multiply it to your answer. So in this case, it'd be 3 square root 3. And then to get to your hypotenuse, which actually, let me just designate letters. A, B, C. So this 3 square root of 3 would give me AB, or not AB, CB. Ooh. And then to find AB, it is 2 times x, which x is 3, so 2 times 3 is 6. Slight variation to this, and I'll be switching colors again. Hopefully it doesn't get too confusing. But let's say instead of that 3, and here's what I got an idea. AC equals 3. Boop, boop, boop. So we'll just change the values as we need them. So the next one, which should probably be the next easiest one, would be if you're given your hypotenuse. So we'll say it's, I don't know, 16. If your hypotenuse is 16 and you're still trying to figure out your rule, what you do to find it, or to find your short leg, is you take your rule for your hypotenuse and you set it equal to the value. So then we would divide by 2. And I know some of you probably did this in your head, and that's totally fine. But then when you divide by 2, you get that your AC is 2. Okay, so then to get CB with this, once you have your AC, it kind of makes your life easier because then you know what your short leg is. It's 8. I don't know why I wrote 2. But once you know what your short leg is, you just multiply it by your square root 3. So multiply by square root 3. So then that long leg would be 8 square root 3. Okay, and then the last scenario that you could possibly have, let's do red this time, boop, is if they give you your CB, and I guess there's 2 variations to this, is if it has a square root 3, and if it is, like if it's 5 square root 3, then you would know that x is 5, because again, you are multiplying by the square root of 3, and so the thing that's not highlighted would be your x. A slightly more complicated version of that, though, would be if we had an actual value. So let's say we had like 12. If we knew that CB was 12, in order to find AC, I would need to take my rule, or take my value of CB, which is 12, and set it equal to the rule. Because you notice my short side is x, and my rule has the x. So in order to solve this, we have to divide by the square root of 3. So then we have 12 over the square root of 3, which we can't have. So we're going to have to rationalize it. So we have 12 times the square root of 3 over the square root of 9. And then square root of 9 is 3. So we have 12 over 3, which can be simplified to just 4. Because that becomes 4, that becomes 1. So then you have 4 square root of 3 equals x. Mind you, this is just to find the short side. So the nice thing is if you find your short side from the other side, then you're able to just use it in whatever way you need to find the third side. So in this case, in order to find my hypotenuse, it is 2 times my short side. Well, my short side is that 4 square root of 3. So 2 times 4 square root of 3. 2 times 4 is 8. So it's 8 square root of 3 in order to find AB. So hopefully this video helped clear some things up for you. If you have any questions, just comment or email or however you want to get a hold of me.